Good day and welcome back to Shipping Insight 2020, a vision for the decade. Today is day 2 of our deep dive sessions. We'll start out with regulatory compliance and solutions. Then we move on to digitalization and cyber risks and rewards, ending up with a very powerful session on safety on the high seas. We're delighted you could join us for this deep dive session today. And then next week, from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'll have the conference and exhibition. So without further ado, let's launch into regulatory compliance challenges and solutions.
Hi, well, my name is Peter Gianopulos, the president of American Ship Repair Company. We appreciate everyone joining us here today. I don't have our presentation up. Joe, how do I get the presentation up? Basically, we have a number of speakers here today. The subject is compliance, challenges, and solutions. We have Nick Confuorto from CR Ocean Engineering with us. We have Tsolaki with us. Tom Hudson from MOL. Tom, can you hear me? You're muted, Tom.
Yes, I can hear you, Peter.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of a background on our company. We're established in 1951. We're a solution provider. We have basically evolved over the years based on the requirements of our customers and the market. Today, we're in the scrubber business, the ballast water treatment business, the MGO chiller business. We represent an international portfolio of shipyards, as well as we have an engine room equipment support business. We have the next slide, please. So shipping, to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite movies, The Godfather, this is the business we've chosen. And I'm sure many of you have been in cocktail parties where people say, oh, you're in shipping. What do you mean, like UPS? No, not like UPS, not like FedEx. This is a great business, an important business. We move 90% of everything, as the book says. The question these days is, can we do this work without harming the planet? And what regulations are there? And how do we work around, not around, but how do we comply with those regulations and do this important work that we do? Next slide, please. So, of course, we have the regulations of the IMO, and they are enforced, as everybody knows. We have the governing bodies, basically, that take from the IMO regulations and apply them to flag state. So, at the end of the day, your flag state says, these are the regulations. If you don't comply, bottom line, we'll take your citizenship away. We'll take your flag away. You won't be able to trade. The enforcement part of it, of course, is at port state, as we all know, which the ports basically say, look, are you complying? If you're not complying, you can't leave our port, you can't trade. Here in the United States, as we all know, we have the U.S. Coast Guard, we have the Justice Department, which are not kidding, as we all know, in terms of enforcing these rules. And if you don't comply, you can get not only your ship, but of course your company and even individuals in trouble, especially and recently with the Justice Department. Next slide, Joe, please. So what are the regulations? I know I'm preaching to the choir here. MARPOL Regulation Annex 1, Annex 2, Annex 3. Next slide, please. I don't want to take too much time because we're going to cover this. Annex 4 for sewage, Annex 5 for garbage, Annex 6 for air pollution, all valiant efforts and all challenges, as this topic says. I mean, there are challenges and there are solutions. Next slide, please. So it's a lot, right? Ballast water, invasive species. It's a serious business. It's not a joke. It's not a tree-hugging fantasy. It's an important business. I mean, if you look at these slides, of course, the cartoon on the left, but on the right, you see what, one group of organisms did to a cooling system. This is important business, and it's something that's important and needs to be complied with. And next slide, please. So what do we do? I mean, Well, let's first talk about the milestones. Of course, we have the ECA regulation, MRV, the sulfur cap, the future planning for greenhouse gases and so forth, the Arctic preparation, prevention of further damage to the Arctic and the Antarctic, and the Ballast Water Convention, which of course is already in place, and measures have been taken in order to adhere and comply. So it's a lot. Next slide, please. It can be daunting. So what do? Right? What do we do as an industry? What do we do as a populace? 1, trust science. 2, listen to the experts. Now, full disclaimer, those 2 are not political statements these days. It just makes sense, right? So today's expert speakers that we have are gonna show and discuss. I just tried to refresh on what the challenges are, but the solutions, we have experts here and that are going to show the science and the technology that is available to comply and to meet these regulations, these important regulations, frankly. We have my friend, Dr. Effie Tsolaki from ERMA First, who's going to talk about ballast water compliance. We have Val Cannon, who from TMS Ocean Guardian, who's going to talk about the Ocean Guardian system, which helps to kind of navigate and organize and understand all these regulations based on where you are. Fantastic system. We have Nick Confuorto, also a friend, who's going to talk about Annex 6. Mr. Kyriazis from P-Ship Systems. And finally, Giles Candy from Scienco Fast, who's also going to talk about Ballast Water Technology. And with that, I thank you, and I turn it over to the experts. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So good morning and good afternoon to all, and thank you for joining. Thank you, Peter, for the invitation and the Shipping Insight. So we can put the presentation in the front, and we can start. My name is Effie Tsolaki, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of ERMA First. ERMA First is a Greek manufacturer of ballast water treatment system. And this technical workshop will provide us an opportunity to relate ballast water treatment system on compliance and challenges. Next slide, please. So as an outline of this presentation, firstly, we will remind ourselves why we do install a ballast water treatment system. Then we will explore ways to compliance as per regulations and testing, and as a conclusion, what is the way forward? Next slide. So why do we install a ballast water treatment system? Next. There are many reasons why a ballast water treatment system is necessary aboard a vessel. So first of all, it is for environmental protection. The invasive aquatic species present a major threat to the marine ecosystem, and shipping has been identified as a major pathway for introducing species to new environments. So it is the obligation of the vessel to follow the rules. The Ballast Water Management Convention came into force on September 2017, and this is the entry into force date. And since then, until 2024, all vessels with 400 gross tonnage and above should manage their ballast water and sediment with a D2 performance standard. Other reasons are, as Peter mentioned, the ability of the vessels to have the ticket to trade. So after the entry into force of the convention, every vessel subject to need to have an international ballast water management certificate. Such includes the ballast water management via ballast water treatment system. And if such is not in place, then the vessel will not be able to trade. The last reason is to be compliant on the discharge. Up to date, the installation of an approved ballast water treatment system was enough to prove compliance. But since October 2018, additional testing for proving the correct installation was introduced by the IMO with circular BWM2 Circular 70. Next, please. So let's continue with the way to compliance with the regulations. Next, please. First of all, the owners should select an efficient ballast water treatment system and not just type approved one. The administrations have already conducted several compliance tested vessels calling their reports. This is part of the IMO calling the experience building phase, And as per today, almost the 60% of those reports are failing on organisms more than 50 micron testing. Next, please. So this is a problem, and what we need to do is to understand the reason behind this. Why we do have these failures of more than 50 microns. So the following failing reasons were identified. So we can have a lack of adequate filtration. You can have damaged filter screens. You can use a different size screen than the one that is used during the type approval testing, or you can either have a contamination first due to valve leakages or to contamination of the ballast water tanks. Next, please. Following, the second way to comply with the convention is the use of that ballast water treatment system. When it is installed, there are a lot of cases where ship owners are not having they are having actually the system in idle, so they don't operate them. The system should be operable on every operation. Next, please. In order to use the ballast water treatment system, ship owners have to select a vendor that should provide full support to the operator and the crew. He has to make sure that the critical spares are stored and available on board the vessel and have a complete list of contingency measures in the ballast water management plan in order to avoid any delays on board. Next, please. Last, the crew training is a very important aspect. The crew should be familiar with the convention requirements and the use of ballast water treatment system that is installed on board. Next, please. In fact, the crew should be familiar with the documentations, the records that vessels should keep and report to every port and flag. The crew should be well trained on the operations of the ballast water treatment system. It was identified that training during the commissioning has been proved not efficient. The land-based training at the training center and the computer-based training are two efficient ways to keep the crew updated and well educated. Next, please. As we are moving forward to this technical workshop, following section explains what is the way towards testing. Next, please. We can start what is the legislation trend that is around. So first, we do have the Circular 70 that introduced back in 2018 by the IMO, and this is the guidance for the commissioning testing. From summer 2019 and towards, there are some countries that share circulars or notice guidances for the commissioning testing, and these are Singapore, Panama, Australia, Cyprus, Greece, Bahamas, Croatia, and from classification societies, the NVGL. Although also we do have European Union that has announced the adoption of the compliance testing and the commissioning on of all the members from October 2021. For the US flag, this is a different, we're talking about a different perspective, protocols and sampling are different. So we do have two different bodies for regulating this. We do have the EPA VGP and what is mandated in the CFR rules. Finally, on February 2020, during PPR 7, there was a draft amendment to Circular 70 that was sent for adoption to MEPC 75. This session was supposed to take in place back in spring 2020, but due to the COVID-19, it was postponed since November 2020. Next, please. So I would like just to remind ourselves what is in Circular 70 and which are the parameters that we measure for compliance. So if we put them in three different categories, we do have organisms more than 50, organisms 10 to 50, and indicators. And those mainly are concerning the human health, and this is the reason why only those are included in the EPA VGP analysis. Next, please. So apart from them, the EPA VGP requirements include sampling for residual biocides and ballast water treatment system record keeping and reporting. Next, please. So this is an overview, what is the mandated for the IMO commissioning compliance testing via the EPA VGP. What we want to keep from here is just a note that the VGP is not commissioning testing. Next, please. So what is the way forward? The compliance testing first is arrived to stay. And so we should all be prepared for making the ballast water treatment system and digital installations a success. For the indicative analysis tool, the frequent use of them, already available portable compliance tools will provide a good performance evidence prior to any official testing, so crews should be prepared in advance. And for the training, ship owners must ensure, in accordance with the regulation B6 of the convention, that the officer and crew are properly trained and competent to carry out their assigned ballast water management duties in all functions. At last, we recommend to ask for compliance testing to all the ship owners. Compliance testing and commissioning eventually will become industry's standard. So with these 4 pillars, we can follow a roadmap for successful implementation of the International Ballast Water Convention and an effective experience building phase. So thank you for your attention and looking forward to your questions.
Very informative as usual.
Yes, I believe she gave us a very clear pathway that a responsible ship owner can follow. Whether they select her equipment or not, they really need to follow all of those steps.
Okay, so next we have Val, I believe.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Good day, everybody. It's very nice to be a part of this forum in this very strange new world of all virtual platforms. I work for Total Marine Solutions, as Peter mentioned. It's a company that for the past 20 years has provided equipment and support to ships regarding regulated environmental discharges. Because of the relationships we build with our clients, we're often included in conversations regarding how to manage environmental discharges and all of those related regulations. Next slide. I know I don't have to tell this group that the environmental regulations are many. They're often complicated and difficult to interpret, and the trend is still heading towards more regulatory oversight. Because of the myriad of regulations globally, it can be very difficult for operators to know what they can do and where. Accidental non-compliant discharges can be extremely expensive, but despite continued training and oversight, they still occur for a number of reasons. Next slide, please. Misunderstanding the MARPOL baselines is actually still quite common. For an example, one vessel discharged liquid food waste in the Great Barrier Reef and was charged a $1.5 million fine. But fines aren't just levied on the shipping companies, they're also levied on the crew. On another vessel, the crew had not traveled through the Great Barrier Reef before and were unaware of the boundaries as defined in MARPOL Annex 5. They believed they were outside the Great Barrier Reef at the time of the discharge. Unfortunately, at the end of the investigation, both the captain and the chief were fined. Next slide, please. The Bahamian archipelagic baselines can also be very challenging, and a number of vessels have been found to have accidentally discharged a variety of wastes inside these baselines, simply due to misinterpretation, but also resulting, unfortunately, in significant fines. Next slide, please. Not being aware of the local import regulations can also result in these accidental non-compliant discharges. Agent information can be incorrect as they're also trying to stay on top of this regulatory load. And port tariffs and guides can change frequently and without notice. Port tariffs in the US generally are reviewed on an annual basis, but any changes may not be highlighted. Or if the language in that tariff doesn't change, as new issues and discharges like ballast water come into play, their inclusion in older language may not be fully understood. As an example, Port Everglades port tariff does not allow for ballast water discharges due to the language that has been a part of that tariff for many, many years. So owners and operators for US flag vessels may know and understand that states and local municipalities can impose stricter local regulations, but vessels from coming outside of the US may not. As an added side, just to highlight the complications even within the same region, regulations can be different. So while Port Everglades does not allow ballast water discharges, Miami, which is just down the road from us, does. Next slide, please. Between 2012 and 2017, the US Coast Guard issued more than 700 vessel deficiencies for ballast-related incidents of noncompliance. In one instance, the company suffered both time and money lost when the vessel had to leave port to conduct the exchange outside of 200 nautical miles. Next slide, please. Rapidly changing regulations present yet another obstacle. Discharging open loop EGCS wash water has been a particularly hot topic recently. It seems almost daily that more countries and ports are banning the use of open loop EGCS or the discharge of its wash water. The China ecozones were put in place in a matter of months and do not allow the use of open loop EGCS. And although a country may have stated they will not ban open loop wash water at the national level, the ports still might. The UK is an excellent example of this. My team continues to find UK ports that have put out recent guidance stating they're not allowing the open loop EGCS discharge. But decisions can also change rapidly in either direction, which affects the ship operations. Argentina announced in early August that open loop EGCS wash water was not permitted to be discharged, but then this was quickly suspended in the course of a few days in late September. Next slide, please. So staying abreast of these changes is challenging to say the least. Email communications from agents are not always correct. Binders of guidance can very quickly be outdated, and spreadsheets cannot be secured against unauthorized changes. Digital solutions, system integrations, and collaboration are going to be essential in managing the vast number of environmental regulations and to take the guesswork out of your environmental compliance. Next slide, please. So solutions like Ocean Guardian bring all of this information into one place where it can be more easily and transparently managed. Ocean Guardian is a digital database that currently has more than 4,400 global maritime environmental regulations, and that number continues to grow. These are geotagged so vessels can see what they can and can't do at a glance. Next slide, please. Ships can quickly understand what MARPOL baseline they're in and the regulations that apply to that location. It can be used to plan their environmental operations ahead of time via the built-in environmental operations tool. ACDIS files can be imported into Ocean Guardian, displaying the environmental regulatory requirements for that route. Shoreside managers can also quickly see what regulations apply for their vessels in the Ocean Guardian administration portal. In the Fleet Ops module, we pull in AIS feeds for the ship, which assists in expediting shoreside support. Company policies can be loaded into Ocean Guardian, further simplifying getting updated information out to your vessels. Next slide. Ocean Guardian has also been integrated into leading navigation software, such as that provided by Navtor, as an overlay to, again, help streamline the planning process. This integration offers efficiencies of time and accuracy of planning. Simplifying compliance and solid decision support can help prevent accidental non-compliant discharges and benefit the bottom line. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Val. Great job. Great job. Thank you.
Very interesting. I think that it is an elegant solution. I've been watching it for years.
Okay, so next, who is next? I think it's Nick Confuorto.
Good morning. I will go through. Can I share the screen so I can change my own slides, Peter, or is that not able to be done? Okay, I'll go without that. You guys change the slides for me. I'm Nick Confuorto. I'm the president and COO of CR Ocean Engineering. We're a company based in New Jersey, and we do scrubbing systems for ships. The next slide. Our systems are primarily for ships. We do inline systems as well as the ones that are called U-type and L-type. We do hybrid, closed loop, and open loop. All metal designed for high temperature, so we have the only true dry system, dry mode system in operation. The others, some of them claim that they design for dry mode, but in reality they don't. With ours, it takes away the concern that many of the ships may have about what happens if the pumps shut down and we don't have any water to cool down the gas, or what happens if the boiler goes into bypass, and therefore you get the full temperatures from the engine. With our systems, they're designed to avoid all those issues. Next slide. What some of the benefits that people don't realize that come from scrubbing systems, besides the sulfur emissions, which we can achieve emissions well below even the MGO used engines, we also reduce quite a lot of the particulates, even farther than the MGO itself. And I'll show a slide that kind of shows that. So for particulates reduction and SOx reduction, there is no comparison between what we can achieve and what MGO can do. The other thing most people do not know is that using heavy fuel with scrubbers, it's a lower CO2 footprint by about 10 to 14%. So it's quite a big plus if CO2 is a requirement for the ship owner. And so the cost of operating HFO with scrubber is going to be quite lower than the operating on MGO or even the new low sulfur fuels. Next slide. This is what I meant. What you see there is a system test. The top ones are MGO. These are the filters from the stack test using MGO. The top three, you can see that black, consistently black. Stack test below, the three below, are using HFO with a scrubber. This clearly shows visually here how much cleaner it is to run a system using a scrubber versus MGO. So the worst part of it is that the filters that you see above have been tested for particle size distribution, and the majority of the particles from MGO are below 2.5 microns, which is very dangerous for human health. While if you use HFO without and easier to be captured by the nose, and also if you do breathe them in, it's easier to cough them out. But with the fine particles that MGO has, they go deep into the lungs and cause heart and lung disease much quicker and to a much higher extent. So using MGO may sound great in some cases where they don't want to be bothered with scrubbers, but they are making things worse for the environment in terms of health effects. And the idea of IMO issuing the regulation MARPOL Annex 6 primarily to save people from health and lung disease, by switching to MGO, they actually made it worse. Next slide. And the other issue that we see coming up in the next few years is going to be this issue of open loop discharge and closed loop discharge. In terms of open loop discharge, companies may at some point be forced into closed loop when they import. And next slide. What we have done is we have prepared ourselves for that. So we now have three options that we offer our customers if they want to have water cleaning when import. Or if they buy a closed loop system completely, then they be using it all the time. But most customers are not going to buy closed loop. Most customers will buy hybrid systems, which they have the option to go open loop everywhere except import, where they can switch to closed loop. Only. Although we are working now on one that will be applied to open loop as well. The difficulty with open loop is that the water is much cleaner. So when you look at water requirements, they're usually based on volume of water. And because there's such a large volume for open loop systems, when you look at what it actually is found in a liter of water, for instance, it's very clean as compared to closed loop. Closed loop will be very dark because it's only a small amount of water and it's circulating, so it's particulates and the oils. But this system will clean that. So this is these are base system, which is using centrifuges. This produces a sludge which is very wet and pumpable. Some clients want to pump their sludge. They don't want to be bothered with moving it. So this is one of the options. Next slide. We also have a system that uses candle filters. This provides a sludge which is also pumpable, but it's less water. So it's a smaller amount of sludge. Next slide. And also comes in pre-built units so that they can just be brought on board and sit in a space. And the final version of the water treatment that we are offering, next slide, is what we call in Oberlin. This is a filtration system. It's a continuous filtration system. It uses some solids to agglomerate the oils. It actually encapsulates the particles and it filters them out. So that when you end up with a dry sludge, this is completely dry, you cannot be pumped. You will need to, as you see here on the left side in green, those are barrels. So the sludge comes into barrels and it's a dry sludge. The positive thing about that is the volume is greatly reduced. So where you might have very large volumes of wet sludge, you will only have maybe 1 or 2 barrels of dry sludge. And since the disposal of the sludge is based on volume primarily, the savings are significant in the disposal costs. So most customers that have gone for this are looking at using it to save money on disposal costs, and therefore the savings will pay for the initial cost of the equipment. And then after that, we'll also be able to operate the system at a great saving. Next slide. And this is what it looks like. On the right side, you see the sludge. It's a solid. It's encapsulated, so it can be easily disposed and non-hazardous. And on the left side, you see the effect of the closed loop. And after the clean is fairly clean. This is the most efficient clean system for water discharge. Luckily, it does not cost any more than the others, but it's a preference of dry versus wet. Next slide, if any. And that was the prepared portion to meet my 7-minute requirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Informative as always. Thanks, everybody, so far. So does anybody have any questions for Nick or Effie or Val or anybody? I have one question for Effie. Effie, when is this sampling expected to be? Now, when did you say it? I know it was postponed due to Corona, but when do you expect the sampling regulation to be put into place?
Actually, Peter, it is already in place. It depends on your flag. So there are flags that they are requesting sampling during the commissioning. The question here is when it will be universal. So, and the response to that is we have to wait when these circulars will be amended under the harmonized survey scheme. But we do have a date of 2022. So the IMO is working on have the commissioning on this, to have the sampling on the commissioning as the standard in every installation. All the flags that are now aligned with that, it is in voluntary base because there is no, it is a guidance. IMO has only guidances, and it is the way how the flags are incorporated them in their national law and what they would like to have from their vessels. that are under their flag.
Understood. Thank you. Anybody have any questions before we move on to the next speaker? Okay.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here with you and with all distinguished attendees. Can you please move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so as we all know, the revised MARPOL Annex 5 prohibits the discharge of all types of garbage and trash plastic into the sea, including the garbage management, port reception facilities, and of course the enhancement of compliance with MARPOL Annex 5. Next slide, please. As we all know, there are a lot of challenges with potable water on board. There's plenty, first of all, of water generation on ships. Then we have the embedded water storage tanks with maintenance, still water, steering from vessel movements. Then we have different types of water pipes on board with water flowing through. Yellowish tap water, as we've seen with quite a few clients, even though on new build vessels. Of course, we have the MLC 2006 requirement for every 6 months to have water laboratory results, plus the industry bans from DGS India and Kuwait regarding plastic and bottles as well, plus the ICE1's latest dehydration survey. We've seen the other day where crew has some kind of distrust on board water due to taste and appearance. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. And then we have, as we've seen all in the news, there are various incidents and reports on plastic bottled water with World Health Organization's health review following Fredonia's New York State University research, Nestlé's lawsuit on tampering, the Poland spring water with ordinary groundwater, and various other studies which have been, which are all the time getting online, and with plastic bottles really affecting everybody who is breathing globally. We'll see a short video. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so very quickly, we have a long background in the commercial shipping industry and stroke technical expertise. We're focusing exclusively on solutions and systems dedicated to the shipping industry. We're working very close with Puricom, the oldest water treatment manufacturer, and we as PSIP Systems design, develop, distribute, update, and fully support branded drinking water vessel systems. And we're of course following all standards and regulations on all aspects. Our solutions are actually exceed the drinking water, the regulations in the industry. And we have distribution centers in Rotterdam, in Athens, in Barcelona, and we recently added new warehouses in Houston, UAE, Singapore, and Hong Kong, so that clients can have quick, fast, and cost-effective access to our systems and consumables around. And we are Puricom and Kinetico USA's official partner and a global distributor for the global shipping industry. And we have behind us engineers, chemists, test laboratories, and everything else that is needed in order to help shipping companies solve the main issue with plastic bottled water on board, and also protect their crew. Next slide, please. Okay, so as a conclusion, we're having many systems in place. We've not seen a video, unfortunately, on board vessels sailing globally. And we're helping shipping companies to easily, quickly, fast, securely, and low cost effectively get rid of plastic bottled water on board for their vessels and have a great and always constantly freshly produced drinking water vessel on board by combining vessels produced water with our autonomous and compact drinking water vessel system. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Giorgo. That was very informative, and we look forward to your link. Thanks again. And now we have Giles from Scienco Fast Company. Giles.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Anybody? Okay, all right. I got a thumbs up. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Giles Candy. I'll be talking a little bit about ballast water treatment regulations, compliance challenges, solutions, see if there's some optimization available, and even some innovation. Next slide, please. So Effie described both why we're doing this and the regulations, so that will sort of cover my next 3 slides. We're trying to prevent the ever-growing amount of ballast water traveling in larger ballast tanks more quickly around the world, from creating instances of aquatic species becoming established invasive species, damaging environments and economies around the world. Next slide, please. Regulation, as Effie said, has been coming and promulgated for a long time. In the United States, there are the federal laws governed by and enforced by the Coast Guard, and there are the vessel general permit laws governed by the EPA. Hopefully these two will come together and be harmonized in the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act, the first version of which was published or pre-published this week by the EPA. Next slide, please. The IMO is governing ballast water discharges worldwide with a convention that was finalized in 2004. The compliance schedule didn't really start until 2019, 15 years later. It's been condensed into 5 years, finishing for retrofits in 2024. The laws are applicable to new vessels today. There's one small wrinkle. Later this month, the IMO will require that all systems being fit to installed on vessels will be required to be tested and certified to the revised G8 guidelines from 2016 instead of the original ones from 2004. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges? Well, you have to, an owner or manager has to select a system. And it's a challenging water treatment exercise. My background is water treatment. I'm trying to treat very large flows of water, up to 25,000 gallons a minute for a VLCC, with a very large range of water quality. And you could be looking at salt, fresh, hot, cold, very high UVT, low UVT, high loads of sediments or other materials, DOC. This puts quite a stress on the treatment system, which actually has to physically fit on board a ship, unlike a terrestrial system, and be able to use the ship's resources, energy, air, pumps, etc., and operate correctly with the ship's normal operating regime. This is tough. So any treatment system that are achieving these standards is a high performance piece of equipment, and it should be treated as such. Next slide, please. So once you've looked at treatment systems, what are the compliance challenges? Well, an owner will be looked at to provide technical compliance and biological compliance. Technical compliance is mostly paperwork, a ballast water management plan, reporting forms, documentation of training, responsibility of for the crews to understand the regulations. The treatment system must be able to demonstrate that it was operating in compliance with its type approval certificate. And where it is not, the crew and the system must show that an accepted contingency as outlined in its ballast water management plan, the vessel's ballast water management plan, was followed, where the treatment system could not work correctly. An accepted contingency must be followed. Biological compliance, the vessel is responsible to be in biological compliance, but it's not actually responsible to prove it, and VGP aside. Biological compliance must be proved or disproved by port state enforcement. The mechanics and of enforcement and compliance are not really nailed down, as Effie mentioned earlier. It's a little bit odd that we had a convention finalized in 2004, and today we're in an experience building phase to establish how compliance will be enforced. Next slide, please. So what are the solutions, and how can you optimize your approach? Well, there's no magic bullet. A ballast water treatment system is an ancillary system to a ballast system, which is a part of a group of systems that make up a vessel. This is an integrating exercise. You're integrating the ballast water treatment system to the vessel. It is not a bolt-on system, it is a bolt-in system. So you should select a system which operates normally as possible, or allows your vessel, to operate as normally as possible. This is important. You should select a system that will physically fit on your vessel and use the resources that the vessel has to offer. And you should select a system which you're confident will give you both technical and biological compliance. Compliance is a sleeper issue. As I said, we're in the experience building phase today. But in time, compliance will be regularly enforced by port state, and it will be important for a vessel to be in compliance, as several have found out in the United States over the last couple of years. So how do you go about getting this chosen system onto the ship? Plan. Do some pre-engineering, a survey, and then use that and plan and plan and plan. Pre-dry dock installation preparation can be very useful, but it must be managed well and planned. And the dry dock itself must be, installation must be planned and managed with an iron fist. Many great ballast water treatment systems have been installed and do not work because the installation did not go well. It didn't go to plan. The installation exercises are a bear. It's getting much, much better, but installations must be managed. And then it's very, very important to plan time for commissioning and crew training. It's no good having an excellently installed system if it's not commissioned correctly and the crew doesn't know how to use it. Ongoing, use the system correctly and maintain it correctly. It's a high performance piece of equipment. And then use the manufacturer, use their service, use their training resources. This is important. And so to optimize your compliance, I would suggest you choose a system which impacts the operation of the vessel the least and provides the most confidence of compliance. Next slide. So is there any innovation or a more elegant second generation solution around? Well, water treatment has been done for a long time. It is unlikely that there will be a fundamentally different way to treat water available. But there are different ways to use ballast water treatment systems. I'm associated with the in-tank system, which is treating in the tank during the voyage. This allows a vessel to complete ballasting as normal without filters. As Effie pointed out earlier, filters can fail and produce problems. The in-tank system is designed and tested to treat without filter. We essentially swap time of exposure for a filter, which allows the larger organisms to be treated. Treating in-tank during the voyage allows any issues with the system to be solved during the voyage. And it also allows treatment and neutralization to be recorded during the voyage. So technical compliance is assured and reported or recorded before discharge in port. discharge as normal, without filtration, without treatment, and discharge from gravity tanks is fine. This allows in-place ballasting and deballasting for a semi-submersible, for example. So I think this is a more elegant solution for many ships, not all ships, but for many ships, this will provide a more elegant solution and some potential for optimizing compliance with ballast water regulations. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Giles. Thank you. We're just taking us right to the edge. Are there any questions for the panel at all? I just wanted to say thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Carlene and her team, her great team that's organized this, and for going into uncharted territory for all of us. I think it's important for us all to get together, and considering the circumstances, this was I think you used technology to get us all together, and I'm thankful to Carlene and all of her team and the Shipping Insight team. I'd like to thank Tom, our anchor, and our qualified and intelligent and insightful panelists, Effie and Nick and Val, Giorgo and Giles. Even though we've all been at this for some time, to varying degrees, it's always great to see people that are experts in their field and to get their impressions and for them to share their expertise. So thank you so much to everyone, and hope you enjoy the conference next week as well. Thank you.